Be Me, Alexandria. For the last few years, my entire life has been this co-working space I manage. We call it the Hive. It wasn't just a job, it was my baby, my vision. I poured everything into making it more than just a place with desks and good Wi-Fi. I wanted to build a community, a real one. And for a long time, I actually did it. It was amazing. The place was always buzzing with energy. We had a mix of people, programmers, graphic designers, writers, a few startup crews. The social hub of it all was our group chat, HiveMind. It was constantly going off. People sharing project breakthroughs, asking for help, posting stupid memes. If you were stuck on a piece of code, you could post it, and within 10 minutes, 3 different people would be at your desk helping you figure it out. That's the kind of place it was. The heart of that whole social scene was my best friend, Kai. We'd known each other forever, long before the Hive was even an idea. He's a game designer, one of those people who just radiates creative energy. He was the one organizing the after-work drinks, the spontaneous pizza lunches, the weekend board game nights. He was the social engine. I was the one who made sure the space itself ran smoothly. We were a perfect team. I remember this one time, a new freelance developer was having a meltdown over a deadline. He was just staring at his screen, completely blocked. Kai saw it from across the room, walked over, pulled up a chair, and just started talking to him. Not even about work at first. Then Beckett, one of our senior engineers, came over too. Beckett's a bit older, more cynical, but a genius. The 3 of them huddled together, and an hour later, the developer was not only back on track, but laughing. That night, the developer bought a round of beers for everyone. That was the magic of the Hive. It was collaborative, supportive. It felt like a family. I was so proud of what we'd built. Then, maybe sometime last year, I started thinking we could be even better. I went to a few leadership and community management workshops. They talked a lot about creating truly safe and inclusive spaces, about being mindful of language and power dynamics. It was like a light bulb went on in my head. We had a great community, but was it a truly conscious one? I realized I had a responsibility, not just to provide a space, but to guide its culture, to elevate it. The first change I made was small. Someone posted in the HiveMind chat, "Hey guys, anyone want to grab coffee?" It was a message I'd seen 100 times, but this time I saw it differently. I replied publicly, trying to be as gentle and educational as possible. Something like, "Friendly reminder to use more inclusive language. Folks, or everyone, works great, so that all members of our community feel included." I even put a little smiley face emoji at the end to show I was being friendly. The chat went quiet for a minute. Then the original poster just wrote, "Coffee anyone?" A few people reacted with a thumbs up emoji, and they went. It felt a little awkward, but I told myself that change is always a bit uncomfortable at first. It was a necessary correction. A week or so later, a group of us were having lunch at the big communal table. Beckett was telling a story about a terrible date he'd been on. He was being very animated, very funny, but the story was basically about how the woman was completely unreasonable. He was getting a lot of laughs from the other men at the table. I felt this pang of discomfort. This was the kind of locker room talk that could make a space feel unwelcoming. I waited for him to finish his story, and then I jumped in. I tried to frame it as a thought experiment. I mentioned that telling stories that frame women in a certain negative light, even as a joke, can contribute to a broader culture of misogyny. I suggested we could challenge ourselves to share stories that were more positive or empathetic. Beckett just stared at me for a beat. He didn't argue. He just kind of shrugged, said fair enough, and then started talking about a new software update. The easy, fun vibe of the lunch was just gone. Everyone finished their food in relative silence and went back to their desks. Again, I felt that awkwardness, but I reasoned it was the price of progress. I was weeding out the subtle toxicities. I was making the garden healthier. My friend Greta, who also worked at the hive, pulled me aside later. She told me she understood what I was trying to do, but that maybe calling Beckett out in front of everyone wasn't the best approach. She thought it might have embarrassed him. I explained to her that these things need to be addressed in the open so everyone can learn. It's about community accountability. She didn't look convinced, but she dropped it. The next big test was one of Kai's famous board game nights. He was a huge board game nerd and had a massive collection. He announced we'd be playing this big, competitive territory control game. It was a favorite in the group. It was always loud, full of friendly trash talk, alliances, and betrayals. Thinking about the workshops, I realized how much the event centered on conflict and domination. I went to Kai privately and suggested that for this game night, we try something different. I had researched some great cooperative board games where players worked together to beat the game itself. I explained my reasoning. It would be more team-oriented and wouldn't create feelings of exclusion or failure for those who lost. Kai looked a little disappointed. He told me people really loved the competitive games, that the rivalry was part of the fun. I held my ground. I told him, as the manager of the space, I wanted to foster collaboration over conflict in all official hive events. He sighed and gave in, "Whatever you think is best, Alex." The cooperative game night happened. It was fine. It was quiet. People were polite. We won the game, and there was a small, unenthusiastic yay from the group. People packed up and left much earlier than usual. When I asked Kai later if he had fun, he just gave a non-committal shrug and said it was an interesting change of pace. In my mind, though, it was a success. No arguments, no gloating winners, no sore losers. It was orderly and safe. I decided to formalize things. I drafted a new community guidelines document and posted it on the wall and in the chat. It was all very standard stuff, I thought. Be respectful, use inclusive language, be mindful of the impact of your words, foster a culture of collaboration, not antagonism. No one said anything negative about it. In fact, no one said much at all. The vibe in the hive began to change, slowly. The main chat became quieter. The memes and jokes started to dry up. It became more utilitarian, people asking work-related questions or me posting official announcements. The big, boisterous group lunches became smaller. More and more, I'd see guys just eating at their desks with headphones on. Part of me was pleased. The space felt more mature, more professional. The chaotic frat house energy was gone. But there was another part of me that felt a little sad. I missed the buzz. I missed the laughter. I told myself it was just a transitional period. People were adapting to a more thoughtful way of interacting. Kai was still around, still friendly, but the spark was gone. He stopped organizing things spontaneously. If I wanted a social event to happen, I had to be the one to schedule it and promote it. I tried to talk to him about it one afternoon. I asked if everything was okay, telling him he seemed a bit distant. He just smiled that tired smile and told me he was just swamped with work, that a big project was taking up all his energy. I believed him. It seemed plausible. The other men followed his lead. They became polite, quiet, and distant. They were perfect members of the co-working space. They paid on time. They didn't cause trouble. They kept to themselves. But they were like ghosts. The social fabric that had made the hive special was fraying, thread by thread. I thought maybe we needed a big, positive event to bring everyone back together, to reignite that old spark. That's when Kai came to me with his big idea. It was something he'd been dreaming about for years, a 24-hour charity gaming livestream. He wanted to do it for the local children's hospital to raise money for new equipment. His passion was infectious. He had a whole plan laid out, a schedule of games, a list of people from the hive who could take turns playing, donation goals with fun rewards. It was brilliant. It was exactly what we needed, a massive collaborative project that was all about doing good. This, I thought, was the perfect opportunity to put our new, conscious community values into practice on a grand scale. I told him I was 100% on board and would help him every step of the way. He was so happy. I saw a flash of the old Kai, the energetic, inspiring guy I missed so much. He got to work immediately, and his energy started to pull people out of their shells. People volunteered to help with the tech setup, to design the on-screen graphics, to manage the social media promotion. For the first time in months, the old Hive magic felt like it was coming back. But as the planning got more intense, I started to notice some issues. I looked at the schedule of games he had planned. It was full of competitive shooters, fighting games, and intense strategy games. I brought this up with him. I explained that featuring games centered on violence and conflict might send the wrong message for a charity event, especially one for a children's hospital. I suggested we include more family-friendly, creative, or puzzle-based games. He looked at me, completely baffled. He explained that these were the games people were actually good at and enjoyed watching. That high-skill, competitive gameplay is what draws viewers and donations on these platforms. I understood his point from a strategic perspective, but I had to think about our community's brand and values. I insisted we diversify the lineup to be more inclusive of different tastes and less focused on digital violence. He pushed back a little, for the first time in a long time. He said it would hurt their donation potential. I told him that sometimes you have to be willing to sacrifice a little performance for your principles. He eventually agreed, but he seemed really deflated. He just erased a few games from the whiteboard and asked me what I wanted to replace them with. A few days later, I looked at the list of people he had signed up for streaming slots. It was almost all men. I knew this wasn't malicious. The most hardcore gamers in our space just happened to be men. But the optics were terrible. I told Kai we needed to make a concerted effort to recruit more women streamers, that it was essential for the event to look diverse and representative of our whole community. He ran a hand through his hair, looking stressed. He told me he had asked everyone, and the people who signed up were the ones who were enthusiastic and confident enough to stream for hours on end. He said some of the women he asked had declined because they weren't comfortable with being on camera or weren't competitive gamers. I told him that wasn't good enough. I said it was our job to create an environment where they would feel comfortable. I told him to go back and personally encourage them, to offer them shorter, less demanding slots, maybe playing one of the cooperative games I had suggested. He didn't argue this time. He just nodded, looking exhausted, and said he would handle it. The planning phase was tense. Every conversation felt like I was coaching him, guiding him, correcting his course. He wanted to make the donation rewards things like the winner of this match gets to pie a streamer in the face. I had to explain to him how that kind of humor, centered on public humiliation, was lowbrow and could be seen as promoting a hostile or aggressive atmosphere. I suggested alternatives, like the donor getting to name a character in a game or choose the next music track. Every single day, there was something new I had to fix. He was the heart and soul of the operation, but I was its conscience, its brain. Greta asked me if maybe I was micromanaging him too much. She said he looked like he was about to snap. I told her I was just making sure the event was executed perfectly, not just in terms of money raised, but in terms of the values it represented. I was protecting the Hive's reputation. I was protecting his project from its own blind spots. By the day of the stream, Kai looked like a ghost. He had dark circles under his eyes and was moving like a robot. But everything was in place. The setup looked professional. The schedule was diverse and inclusive. The donation incentives were wholesome. I had successfully molded his raw, chaotic passion into something polished, responsible, and safe. I was proud of what I had accomplished. I thought that once the event was a success, he would see that all my interventions, all my corrections were for the best. He would understand that I was just helping him be the best version of himself. The stream was about to go live. He was doing the final checks on the equipment, his back to me. I walked up and put a hand on his shoulder. I told him I was so proud of all the work he'd done. He didn't turn around. He just flinched, very slightly, and kept on working. The stream went live. The first couple of hours were a little slow, as expected for the middle of a workday. But Kai was a great host. He was funny, engaging with the chat, and genuinely good at the games. Slowly, the viewer count started to climb. Donations started trickling in. By the evening, the place was packed. People who had finished work stayed behind to watch and cheer. The energy in the room was electric. I took over managing the donation alerts and reading messages from the chat, acting as a sort of co-host. I made sure to highlight the most wholesome messages and gently steer the conversation away from anything that felt too aggressive or gamery. Every time someone made a donation, the whole room would cheer. We flew past our first few donation goals. I saw Kai relax as the night went on. He was still tired, but he was in his element. He was a natural leader, a natural entertainer. I felt a surge of pride watching him and watching my community. This was what the Hive was supposed to be. Everyone working together, supporting each other, doing something good for the world, and I had helped guide it there. I had made it inclusive. I had made it safe. During one of the more competitive matches, one of the streamers got really hyped up after a win. He shouted and banged the desk a little, a very typical gamer reaction. A few years ago, I wouldn't have thought twice about it. But now, I saw it as a small burst of toxic masculinity. Aggression, a celebration. I made a mental note to talk to him about it later, privately, about channeling that energy more constructively. The night bled into the early morning. A few people went home to sleep, but a core group of us stayed, powered by coffee and the thrill of it all. Kai was a machine. He played for hours straight, his focus unwavering. Around 6 a.m., when the sun was starting to come up, we hit our main fundraising goal. The room exploded. People were hugging, high-fiving. It was an incredible moment. Kai just gave a weak smile, looking completely drained. But we weren't done. The stream was scheduled for 24 hours. The last few hours were a blur. The donations just kept coming in, faster and faster. It was like we had tapped into something, a wave of generosity. When the 24-hour mark finally hit, we had more than doubled our original goal. The final number on the screen was staggering. The stream ended, and the room just erupted into the loudest, most joyful noise I'd ever heard in the Hive. People lifted Kai onto their shoulders. He was laughing, looking overwhelmed and exhausted, and happier than I'd seen him in a year. He was a hero. He had pulled off something amazing. Someone put on music. Someone else ordered a mountain of celebratory breakfast pizzas. It turned into an impromptu party. Everyone was coming up to Kai, shaking his hand, patting him on the back, telling him how incredible he was. I stood back for a bit, just watching. I saw the community I had dreamed of, but I also saw the things that still needed work. The loud, chest-thumping energy, the focus on a single male hero. It was a success, yes, but it was also a teachable moment, a moment to frame this success in the right way. I waited for a lull in the crowd around him. I walked over to him, and people quieted down a little, seeing the manager approach. They probably expected me to give a speech. Kai was beaming, his face flushed with victory and lack of sleep. I put on my warmest, most supportive smile. I started by telling him how immensely proud I was, that what he had accomplished was truly phenomenal. He nodded, still smiling, waiting for me to continue. And then I made the pivot. I told him I thought it was a fantastic first attempt, and that for the next one, we could think about how to make it a more truly representative community effort. I mentioned, in a light, constructive tone, that the intense focus on competition and winning was something we should examine. That while it clearly worked for fundraising, it also reinforced a very specific and sometimes problematic type of masculine energy. I suggested that the event's success was a testament to his passion, but also that we could achieve similar results in the future through a more collaborative and less antagonistic framework. I was essentially giving him notes for improvement, the way a good mentor would. I was helping him see the bigger picture. As I was talking, I saw the light in his eyes just go out. It wasn't like a switch flipping off. It was like a dimmer switch being slowly, deliberately turned all the way down. His smile vanished, not into a frown or a scowl. It just disappeared. His face became a perfect blank, an empty mask. The noisy, celebratory chatter around us had died. The silence was heavy. I could feel everyone's eyes on us. When I finished speaking, he just looked at me for a few long seconds. I couldn't read his expression at all. It was like he wasn't there. I was expecting him to maybe discuss the points with me, to engage with the feedback. Instead, he just nodded, a single tiny movement of his head. And then he said, so quietly I could barely hear him, "I understand, Alex." That was it. He turned around, navigated his way through the silent crowd, picked up his jacket, and walked out the door. No yelling, no argument, no drama. He just left. The party was over. The music was still playing, but the energy had evaporated. People started gathering their things, avoiding eye contact with me. Within 15 minutes, the room was empty, except for me and a bunch of cold pizza boxes. I told myself he was just exhausted, that he was overstimulated and needed to sleep. I told myself that once he had rested, he would understand the value of my feedback. He would see that I was only trying to help. The next day, the hive was quiet, unusually so. Kai came in around noon. He walked straight to his desk, put on his headphones, and started working. He didn't say good morning. He didn't make eye contact. I walked over to his desk, planning to ask him how he was feeling, to clear the air. He saw me coming. He didn't take his headphones off. He just looked at me. I asked if he was recovered from the stream. He just nodded. I asked if he wanted to grab lunch later. He shook his head. I stood there for a moment, waiting for more, but there was nothing. He turned back to his screen. It was like talking to a brick wall. I walked back to my office, feeling a weird mix of confusion and irritation. It was so passive-aggressive. If he was mad, why didn't he just say so? The days that followed were strange. It was like a silent plague was spreading through the hive. One by one, the other men started to emulate Kai's behavior. Headphones became a permanent fixture. The chatter in the communal kitchen stopped. If I walked in while two guys were talking, the conversation would instantly die. They'd grab their coffee and leave. The hive mind chat, once my greatest source of pride, became a ghost town. The only posts were my official announcements about maintenance or events, and no one ever replied to them. The sense of community was just gone. The place was now just a room full of people working in silence. It was efficient. It was professional. It was completely and utterly dead. My friendship with Kai was gone, too. I tried texting him, asking if we could talk. He'd reply hours later with a single word. Busy. Later. Okay. Eventually, I stopped trying. I tried to fight it. I tried to restart the old traditions. I announced a community pizza Friday in the chat. On Friday, I brought in 10 large pizzas and set them up in the kitchen. A few people came, took a slice, said a quiet thanks, and took it back to their desk to eat alone. Most of the pizza went uneaten. Greta was trying to be a bridge. She would still talk to me, and she would still talk to them. I asked her what was going on. Why was everyone acting so weird? She looked uncomfortable. She said that people were just busy, focused on work. I knew it was a lie, but I couldn't get anything else out of her. My breaking point was when I tried to organize a community dialogue night. I sent out a calendar invite and posted a big announcement. The topic was reconnecting and rebuilding our hive. I was desperate. I thought if I could just get everyone in a room and facilitate an open, honest conversation, we could fix this. I set up chairs in a circle. I brought in snacks and drinks. I was so nervous, but also hopeful. The time for the event came and went. 3 people showed up, Greta and 2 women who were relatively new to the hive and didn't know any better. We sat there in that big, empty circle of chairs for 30 minutes of the most awkward silence I have ever experienced. Then I told them we could just call it a night. I went home, and I felt a deep, hollow kind of loneliness. I had built this amazing thing, and now it was crumbling around me, and I had no idea why. It felt so unfair. I had only ever tried to make things better, to make people better. The next week, I saw Beckett packing up his desk. He had been with the hive since the very beginning. He was one of the originals. I couldn't let him leave without an explanation. I walked over to his desk. His face was grim, determined. I asked him where he was going. He told me his freelance contract was up and he'd found a new place to work from. I knew it was more than that. I finally just broke. I asked him, "What did I do wrong? Why does everyone here hate me now? Why won't Kai talk to me?" My voice was shaking a little. I felt so pathetic. Beckett stopped packing his box of monitors and cables. He turned to face me fully. And for the first time in months, someone was actually looking at me. Really looking at me. There was no anger in his eyes, just a profound, bone-deep weariness. He told me nobody hated me. He explained that hate takes energy, and everyone was out of energy. He said I had turned every single social interaction, from a joke in a chat to a lunch conversation, into a test. A test they could never pass, because the rules were always changing, and the judge was also the prosecutor. He told me I had taken Kai's greatest triumph, an event he poured his heart and soul into for a month, and in front of everyone, I had reframed it as a problematic failure that needed my correction. I opened my mouth to defend myself, to say I was just giving constructive feedback. He held up a hand to stop me. He said that was the moment everyone understood. He told me Kai didn't get angry. Kai didn't have a tantrum. He just did the math. The math was simple. The emotional cost of engaging with me and my new rules had become too high. The return on investment was 0. So he stopped investing. And everyone else, Beckett said, saw his logic and made the same calculation. He told me it wasn't a protest. It wasn't a boycott. It was a mass resignation. They had all quietly quit the job of being my friend and community member. He picked up his box. "I'm leaving because I'm paying for a co-working space, not a library. And right now, this place is just a very expensive library." He walked out without another word. I stood there, in the middle of the silent room, for a long time. His words just echoed in my head. It wasn't a protest. It was an optimization. That night, I was the last one to leave. I walked through the empty, silent space. All the desks were neat. The floors were clean. Everything was in its proper place. It was perfect. It was orderly. It was completely and utterly safe. And it was the loneliest place on earth. I pulled out my phone and looked at my chat history with Kai. I scrolled up, past the recent one-word replies, past the awkward silences. I went back months, to when it was filled with jokes, with stupid pictures, with him checking in on me, with us planning the future. My thumb hovered over the screen. I typed out a message. "I miss my friend." I stared at it for a minute. Then I deleted it. I knew he would never reply. I had gotten exactly what I wanted. A community free of conflict, free of problematic behavior, free of toxic masculinity. The only thing I hadn't realized was that a community free of all those things is also a community free of people. It's just an empty room and a deafening silence